We talked this morning about the tzitziyot, the four-cornered garment that Hebrew men wore with the tassels on the bottom of them, and I promised that I would spend a little bit more time talking about that this afternoon. One of the Old Testament stories that I had never really connected with has to do with Elijah and Elisha. At the time that Elijah was getting ready to be taken into heaven, he kept trying to leave Elisha and all of his followers behind. In those days, there would be a leader of a group of prophets. And so Elijah had his group of prophets that followed him around and learned from him. And Elisha was kind of his right-hand man. At the time that Elijah got ready to go back to heaven, he kept trying to leave them. And Elisha said, "I'm not going to leave you. I don't care what happens." He says, "Well, all right, you can come with me." And then Elisha asked Elijah for a double portion of his spirit. In other words, I want to be the one who inherits the spirit from you, the kind of things that you can do, the kind of leadership that you have. I want to be the next one to lead and to do those things. Elijah said, "If you see me when I go into heaven, then you can have it." Well, Elijah left the earth and left behind his mantle. His mantle being that four-cornered garment that had the tassels. Elisha picked it up, carried it with him, and when he got back to the river they had crossed, he touched the river with it, and the river opened up and gave him a way to walk through. So that all the followers of Elijah now understand that Elisha has Elijah's mantle and Elijah's power. So really some important things connected to these four-cornered garments that I had never ever thought about. But I want to read to you from Deuteronomy. This is where it was first commanded that the Israelite men wear it. And then just a couple of comments and I'll let you go. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you are to make tassels on the corner of one's garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all the commands of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by going after the lusts of your own hearts and eyes. Then you will remember to obey all my commands and will be consecrated to your God. I am the Lord your God." So that's why they wore these things. Not only would you be pretty aware that you have tassels hanging down here, you don't want to walk on them, you're always making sure that your tassels are in the right place, but other people would see them. So people who were wondering what kind of person you were, especially if they were Jewish and understood this, when you came by them and you had the four tassels on your garment, they knew that you were Orthodox, that you were a law keeper. In the modern day, I don't know about back then, but in the modern day when they make these tassels, they tie 613 knots. Now when I say God's law, most of us think 10 Commandments, right? There are 613 that the rabbis have identified. There are 365 thou shalt nots and 248 thou shalts. But 613 knots they tie these cords into to remind them to keep all of the 613 laws that they have in their covenant. How well do you think most people do in keeping all 613? Not very well, right? That's why Paul says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, being justified freely through his blood. Right? So all of the things that God told the Israelites to do and not to do, nobody could ever keep the law perfectly. Only Christ could do that. And having done so, he went to the cross and gave us all a way of having forgiveness. So when Christ went back into the heavenlies, in a sense, he left behind his spirit. The spirit that all Christians have. The spirit that's given to us as a gift when we're baptized into Jesus Christ, as we come into contact with the blood of his sacrifice. And so we live in this world reminded not only that we can't keep all 613, but that in Christ we can have forgiveness because of his blood and because of his sacrifice. So maybe that's something new that you've learned today. If you need to respond, we want to help you, encourage you any way we can as we sing.